Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report this weekend. We talked a lot about tariffs in our news block, and maybe is that, the fear of tariffs fueling some of this demand that we've seen as of late. And there's a lot of concern about tariffs and what the impact that it could have on agriculture. And, NCGA and ASA recently did a study, an impact study on tariffs. And they found that if we did impose 60% level tariffs, specifically on Chinese goods, corn prices would fall anywhere from 8 cents to 12 cents a bushel. Soybean prices, 60 cents to $1 a bushel.
Yeah. Current corn prices, cash price of corn is, by our estimate, $1 under production costs today, even after a rally from the August lows. Soybeans are $2 lower. You've mentioned even lower prices in the case of tariffs. I've said this often to producer groups when I travel around and talk about trade and tariffs. Trade is so important to American agriculture, not only to the grains, but to dairy and to the pork and the beef industry. Our country exports everything in the world of agriculture. And if we get into a trade war, agriculture producers are going to learn that they're the infantry in the front line. That's where the casualties will be. It's not good.
No. And, you think about some of the other challenges that farmers face in the U.S. One of those is labor, and specifically the dairy industry. Dairy industry has always been labor tight. But when you look at some of these small and medium-sized farmers, how are they dealing with those labor constraints?
And that's a question that I often get when I'm talking to producers, are what are those innovative ways to address labor, especially when in some areas they had a high school population that would come and milk, and that's sort of not the case anymore. And a lot of our producers are looking at more creative ways to adopt technology to help with that labor. And we have sort of two groups in that farm size around like 200 cows or less that are looking at robotic milking. Some of them are going in with that all-in investment of about $200,000 per unit and looking at how that can milk about 60 cows over the course of the day. Whereas some of our other farms are looking at finding older robotic milkers for about $15,000, retrofitting that. So we're further along in that technology adoption now, where some of those labor things can be addressed in a slightly cheaper alternative.
Dean, there's a lot of questions about Farm Bill. Are we going to see a Farm Bill? Are we not? What is the outcome going to be? Can we get it passed in the lame duck session? What's going to happen? A lot of uncertainty there. We talk a lot about Farm Bill for some of the commodity programs out there and the impact for producers. But let's look at ag research. How vital is the Farm Bill to ag research?
Yeah, it's really critical to that. It often does get lost between SNAP conversation, commodity conversations. So I always say that most of the things we do in research doesn't happen. We don't create a new app every day like people think about digital technologies. It takes 20 and 30 years to make those investments. So that federal funding is critical to be able to make those investments. And we're just talking about SAF, for example, those crops. Those have been under development since the 1990s and just now coming into market as new sources of aviation fuel, for example, and other purposes. And one of our colleagues, Phil Pardee here at the university, did an analysis that showed in Minnesota there's a $40 return for every dollar invested in ag research. And your eyes opened up a bit there with that. And the reason is all these returns are annuities, right? Every year when you get that crop, that return to it. And then in Minnesota, we have extraordinary climate conditions for corn and soybeans and crops in general, horticultural crops. So when you put $1 of research here, the yields and returns to that are large. And that goes across the Midwest and U.S. in general. So it really is critical to food security, food sustainability, all those elements. And we often do say those investments in food security are national security.
Well, speaking of that research, we're highlighting a lot of neat research here at the University of Minnesota coming up. Growing the spectacular spuds, some potato research, plus how they're using robots to scout fields and address problems in the field. I'm telling you, there's so much cool stuff happening here at the University of Minnesota. We will talk about that coming up. But first, we need to take a quick break, and we'll have much more right here on U.S. Farm Report.